All right, good morning, everybody. Happy Friday. Thanks for joining me. We'll go ahead and get started here. If you got your questions, go ahead and post them. If you're on a mobile device, you can post them below the video. If you are on a laptop, desktop, computer, something like that, you can post them to the right of the videos where you'll see that. So I always start with questions that were posted up to an hour before. So I'll start with Scott C. So if you happen to be on here and you posted your question, more than an hour ago before 10 a.m. Eastern time, no worries. All you have to do is copy and paste your question there, and we'll answer it, later on in the office hours. So that's just how that works. If you're new to office hours, that's the way I do that. So just so I'm not answering for questions for people that were, people don't understand how it works. They might post their question at 9 o'clock last night, and odds are they're not here to see their question get answered. So I just try to give basically precedent to the people who I think are here waiting to see their question get answered. But on Fridays, what I usually like to do is I like to go over in the beginning before we get a lot of people in here. I like to go over in the beginning, basically, a very common question that I get from students that I think will really help you. So these would be questions I get through the office hours or just things that I notice in working with students and things like that. I think you'll really enjoy this. Where did my ball go? I guess we'll use this. So essentially, something that I've been noticing with students that I work with in swing reviews is that how a lot of them are just not really set up for success to start the swing. So basically the question is, how do you set up for success for your golf swing? So what we want is a good setup, and a good setup sets up a good backswing, and a good backswing sets up a good downswing, which sets up a good impact, which is really what we want. Now, can you have a poor setup and still hit the golf ball well? Yeah, but it's just going to make it more difficult. It's going to be more difficult to be consistent. You're going to have to make some compensations and things in your swing to be able to do that. So if you have a great setup, it's so much easier to have a good backswing. And if you have a good backswing, it's so much easier to have a good downswing and impact, which is the ultimate goal. So what are some major things that I see that are issues with people in their setup? So one is probably the biggest one is where people set up very rigid and unathletic. So what that would look like is where we really try to get our back really, really straight, right? We have our shoulders kind of back, and we have a lot of flex in our legs. We're kind of pushing our butt back out like this. And this is just hard to move when you're in this kind of position. It's hard to move athletically when you do that. So, and the other thing that it does is it introduces a lot of tension into your swing, which again, it's hard to move fast and athletically when you do that. So if you're someone who's really trying to keep your back flat, but in reality, you're actually kind of arching your back, right? And you're pulling your shoulders back, and you've got your butt way too far over your heels, too much flex in the legs, and you're kind of out here really, really reaching for the golf ball. If you're in that kind of position, it just makes it really difficult for you. So here's what I would say to folks that are in that position. We'll go to the other end of the spectrum too. But folks that are in this position, number one, I would say is let's get just a little bit of flex in the knees. We don't need to be like this. This puts your backside too far over your ankles. And typically what's going to happen to a lot of players when I see this is that you're going to kind of stand up and move out of your posture when you're coming up in the backswing. So what we want to do is get our backside a little bit more under. We don't want to have to where our belt line's very much angled down like this. Get it a little bit under, so that way your butt is just a little bit over your ankles here. That's what you want to feel. Feel like you're a little bit more level. If you imagine your hips being a bucket full of a bucket of water, right? Your hips are a bucket of water, and you're kind of, right now, if you're like this, that water is spilling out of the front of over your belt buckle, right? What you want to do is spill a little bit less of your belt. You still want to be tilted down, but you just don't want to be spilling all the water out. Spill just a little bit out of there. So that's number one. The other thing is relax your shoulders. Just kind of go like this. If you go like this a little bit, kind of relax your shoulders. You may see like Ernie Els. You see him, he's always going like this. Those guys have really smooth swings. A lot of the guys, a lot of tour players, you're going to see them they're always loosening up their shoulders. That's why I want you to feel. People that are really trying to arch and get their back straight, they're pulling their shoulders back too much. So just let your shoulders relax. And you can see when I do that, you can see I have a little bit of rounding in my back. And if you look at tour players in their setup, you're going to see some rounding in their back a little bit. That's okay. Let that happen. That's going to allow you to be athletic in your posture. So as far as posture goes, if you're one of those people that's really rigid and has a lot of tension, but too much flex in the knees, butt pushing out too much, get a little bit less flex. You just want to get enough flex to where you can move athletically is what you want to be. If imagine I was running at you, how would you prepare? Well, you probably wouldn't go like this, right? You would just kind of go like this. You just get down a little bit so that way you can move. If you're a shortstop getting ready to ground, field a grounder, right? You wouldn't go like this. You would get into an athletic position so that way you can move around and get down low and things like that. So that's all you want to do with the knee flex. And then hinge at the waist here. And what I like to say to players is I like to say just let your arms kind of hang down, and that helps you relax your shoulders as well. So relax your shoulders, let your arms hang down, get a little bit of flex in the knees here. Your hips are going to be level at this point. And then just hinge the hips down a little bit. And I'm letting my arms hang. And as soon as my hands get about 4 or 5 inches in front of my thighs, that's when I'm going to grab the club. And you can see here, this puts me in a really, really good athletic position to be able to move in the golf swing. Now, I also see some people that are kind of in the other way, right? They get to where this is a little bit more, would be more on the rare side. But if you're one of these people that has a really rounding in the back, right, and your butt's way underneath, right, you're not going to see a lot of this. But if you have a lot of curvature, like you're actually kind of really bringing your shoulders forward, right, you're protracting both shoulders, meaning that your shoulder blades are moving away from your spine with both shoulders. And if you're more like this, right, now this is where we want to kind of relax, pull the shoulders back just a little bit, let them relax, and just let them hang down and do that same kind of thing, right? So that's going to help you to move. If we pull our shoulders forward and we really round the back like that, again, that's going to the other end of the spectrum. That's going to make it difficult to turn and move athletically. So that's really what you want to do there. Now, as far as you standing far away, how close to stand and how far away to stand from the golf ball, mainly, what I just talked about, where you're letting your hands just kind of fall down. You grab the club, wherever that ball is, that's how far you want to be, right? So you can be successful and stand more on top of the golf ball, right? And you can be successful and stand further away from the golf ball. There are pros and cons to both, but in general, most players are going to be better at being in that being able to, if you can fit about a fist between your thighs and the butt end of the club and your hand here, that's going to be the best for most players. If you stand further away, you're going to tend to want to kind of go out to the golf ball. You're also going to typically introduce some tension into the swing because you kind of have to reach out for it, right? And a lot of times, sometimes your shoulders will go more in that kind of position when you do that. As you can see, when I reached out for it, see what happened to my shoulders? My shoulders went out and it made my posture worse, right? So in general, that's not going to be good, but it doesn't mean that you can't. Bryson DeChambeau, right? He stands further away from the golf ball than most players. He's kind of out like this, and he does just fine. And he's talked about how he actually has a lot of tension in his swing, and he does just fine. You can be successful, but I found that with most players, it's not the recipe for success for most players. It works for him, and if it works for you, then great. But in general, it doesn't. Everybody's a little bit different. Obviously, he's cut from a different cloth, right? Some things are going to work a little bit better than others. And also, standing really close to the golf ball. John Rahm, Jim Furyk, both people that basically stand on top of the golf ball and do very well with that. But I find that most players are going to typically, because most players struggle with early extension, moving the hips toward the ball and things like that. The closer you stand to the ball, the less space you have, the less margin for error you have with that. So that's usually not going to be the best for most players there. Now let's talk about ball position. Now ball position I like to simplify this as far as ball position forward and back in the stance. The easiest way to really think about ball position is with a shot that you're hitting off the turf. If you think one ball forward of the middle of your stance, that's going to be about a good place for about any club that you're hitting off of the turf, whether it's a fairway wood or a wedge. So if that is the direct middle of my stance, one ball forward of that is in general going to be a very good place for most people. Really, you can be very simple and have two ball positions. One for shots that you hit off the turf and one for your driver that you hit off of a tee. If you really want to make things simple, you can do that. So that's all I would do. One ball forward for shots off the ground, for any shot that you're hitting off the ground, no matter what club it is. And then for a driver, what I would say is straight down from the lead shoulder. So you'll have a little bit wider stance with the driver for a little bit more stability there, and also promoting a little bit more upward angle of attack into the golf ball. And straight down from the lead shoulder is going to typically be a good place for most players. Now, you may have heard inside the lead heel and things like that, and that's probably going to be about the same place for a lot of people. But if you're more of a wider stance player like Brooks Koepka, off the lead heel is going to be really, really far forward. Straight down from the lead shoulder is usually going to be better. If you're a narrower stance player, which is completely fine with the driver, straight down from the lead shoulder, that's going to be pretty good still. Straight inside the lead heel, that might be a little too far back with the driver. So we want to promote a more of an upward angle of attack with the driver, which is why we play it more forward. So you can really keep it simple there. Now, if you want to add a little bit more complexity, and this is basically what I do, is wedges, I play about in the middle of my stance. So wedges would be played right on top of this stick, and that helps me to hit a little bit more down on the golf ball. And it helps me to get a little bit more forward shaft lean with a wedge, which gives me lower flight, more spin. That's what I like to have with a wedge. So you can do that as well. And then for like a hybrid or a fairway wood, I would go two balls forward. That allows me to come in a little bit more shallow, add a little bit more loft, which helps me get the ball up in the air and hit the ball further. Bring it in high and bring it down soft. That's what I like to do with the fairway woods in the hybrid. So that's an optional thing. So you can add another two ball placements there. But really, you can just have two and be very, very successful. So we talked about posture, having that correct posture. We talked about how far to stand away from the golf ball and how to determine that by, just letting your arms hang, staying nice and relaxed. And then we talked about ball position, where that should be forward and back in the stance. You do these things correctly, and you're going to set yourself up for success. And I find with a lot of students, they don't even know that they're doing these things wrong. Some students, they know. They'll tell me, hey, I'm not sure what to do with my setup. Let me know what I need to do. And we talk about these things. And some students, they're wanting to do things in their swing, but their setup is really hindering them or just flat out not allowing them to be able to accomplish these things in their swing. And the cool part about this stuff is that it's very easy, very, very easy to implement in there. Now, one thing I didn't talk about in this setup, and it's really, really important, is our spine angle. So with our spine angle, we want to be nice and angled away from the target with all of our clubs. So if I draw a line from my belt buckle to my shirt buttons, I want to be about 6 to 8 degrees angled away. That's going to help me to be in a nice, good position where I'm stable at the top. And that's going to allow me to get into a more angled away position at impact. So that'd be one other big piece of the setup that I like to focus on with players. If we're very vertical like this, we're going to tend to kind of lean toward the target as we go up to the top. If we're too far angled away, we may come in too much from the inside and start hitting the ground back here in the downswing. So that would also be another piece to work on. And that's a part of the Top Speed Golf system. To work on that, if you're a member of the website, it's included in your membership. All you have to do is click the instruction tab at the top of the screen at the website there and select the Top Speed Golf system, then select the stable fluid spine course to get started on ingraining those motions. So like I said, I'm going to start here with Scott. So Scott C says, any drills I can do to get my hips to turn during the downswing and at impact? So yes, I mean, there's really an endless array of drills that you can do. But really what you want to get down to is the reason why you're doing it. Because along with an endless array of drills for you to be able to do that, there's kind of an endless array of reasons why you might be doing it. So I can kind of go through a few of those here. I can't spend, I mean, that would be an entire office hours talking about every little thing. But what I would look at is a couple things. One is the reason why you can't open up your hips at impact. Is it because you are early extending in the backswing? So that would be something in the backswing that's happening that's not allowing you to do that. So what that means is, and it could be, we talked about setup earlier, standing too far away from the golf ball. Let's assume that you're not doing that. You have a good setup. But in the backswing, you tend, and it could be caused by having a poor setup, but in the backswing, if you start to move your hips toward the target and you're getting out on your toes, typically that's going to carry to the downswing, and you're not going to be able to open up your hips when you do that because you're not going to be able to reflex your legs, right? So that could be a reason. If that is the case, you want to, one, make sure you have a good setup there, and then really feel like you're pushing this hip back, right? We're not sliding our hip away. We're pushing this hip back and getting it nice and deep in the start of the backswing. A lot of people, in an effort to try to get their hips open in the downswing, they feel like, well, if I turn my hips away, that's just going to make it a lot harder for me to do that. And it's actually not the truth. If you don't turn your hips away, then what's going to happen is that as you go up to the top, you're going to tend to stand up, and that's going to make it way more difficult to get the hips open as you come into impact. So really push that hip back and out of the way, so that way you can get loaded up and in a good position here at the top. So that's what brings me to the next part, is having that correct structure at the top of the swing. If you are what we would call short and across, right, you're going to start down steep and then have to stand up when you come down the downswing. If you are basically starting down steep in the transition, right, whether you're long and on plane and then starting down steep or what have you, then you're going to stand up and come out of your posture and when you come down in impact. So having that correct structure at the top and having that that correct transition as you start down, that's going to be really a big deal for getting the hips to respond correctly. Because basically what's happening is your hips are responding to what you're doing with the club. So if that's the case, that's the move course. So getting that club shallowed out as we're starting down, that's going to be really, really important for getting that. Because if I have this club in the right position as I'm starting down, so shallow would be having this club pointed a little bit outside the golf ball and my hands basically right in front of my chest here, not too far behind, not too far in front, right? Which would be a little bit hard to do and be shallow. Typically, if you're out in front, you're also steep, but right in front of my chest here, and the butt end of the club pointing outside the golf ball. So usually lead arm is going to be a little bit inside of what the target line would be, right in front of my chest. And that's going to allow me to stay in my posture and rotate through impact. I don't have to make a compensation with my hips to get the club back on plane, which isn't going to be good for my hips to do, right? So let's say that all those things are good. Your backswing is good. You're getting your hips nice and deep. You're turning really good. You're creating a great structure at the top. You're getting a good transition as you're starting down. But even when you're right there, you don't open up the hips. You still just kind of go like this. Now, that could be because of the reason of the way that you square the face. And it also could be because of just not moving your hips properly, right? So if it's the way that you're used to squaring up the face, now what we have to understand is that releasing the club early is a means to square up the face, right? So if I release the club early, I'm doing other things in my swing to basically open the face, because this is a closing of the face mechanism. I know it's kind of complicated, but basically what it means is if I'm releasing the club early to square the face, I don't have time to get my hips open. I have to get that face square. And if I opened up my hips and did that, it would be over the top, right? So, and a big time hook to the left, or, pull hook or a huge slice or something like that. It won't be very good ball flight. So that's going to be the move as well. And I'll tell you where to go to all this stuff at the end. Now, let's say all this is good. You're just not opening up your hips. And because of that, you're having to flip the club and things like that. If that is the case, well, we need to know how to move our hips properly, right? So that's going to be in the start of the downswing. So assuming that we have a good structure at the top here, we're not way across and starting down steep and things like that. We have a good structure here at the top. What we need to do is we need to reflex the legs, right? So you need to bend the legs. What I see a lot of times what people do from the top of the swing when they try to get their hips open, what they do is they take their right hip or their trail hip and they just go like that, right? Well, that's not opening the hips, right? We're just going into extension right away. That's what's referred to as early extension. What we need to do is we need to go up to the top of the swing, and then as we start down, as we're getting to our lead side, we're falling to our lead side, we need to push the hips back out. It's almost like if there was something behind me here, as I'm starting down, I almost put it, I'm sitting and rotating and pushing my backside into that. That's what I want to feel like. And then from there, once I get here, then I'm going to extend up, and that's how I rotate my hips in the downswing. So if you look from this angle, by the time I get my lead arm back to parallel in the downswing, I'm getting my hips back to square here, and I've got flex in my legs, and I'm basically sitting and rotating into it. And you can see how my lead knee is moving out like that. And because my lead knee moves out like that, now my leg is at an angle and my hip is in a position to where now I can extend. I can push into the ground, and now I can extend and get my body open into impact. If you look at it from this angle, I'm going up to the top. As I get down to first parallel with my lead arm, my hips are back to square. I have lots of flex. My lead leg has moved out. It's angled in toward my body if you're looking from this angle. And now I can push into the ground and rotate my body open here and extend into impact. So there's lots of drills on the website to work on that aspect. What I would do is I would search. So if you need to work on the move, then I would go to the instruction tab, select that, and then select Tosby Golf System, then select the move. If you look at your swing and that's what you see. If you need to work on, the hips moving, not moving toward the golf ball, and in the backswing or even in the downswing, sort of what we touched on just now, that's going to be the stop early extension course. If you're seeing those pieces of your swing. Now, if you look at your swing and you just don't know what it is and you need help, I'd highly recommend you sign up for unlimited swing reviews, because I'm telling you, I can look at your swing and tell you, okay, this is what we need to do. This is the plan to get your hips open. And it may start with changing something in your setup. It may start with something in your backswing. It may start with creating a structure at the top. That all may look good. And then it may just be downswing stuff. We have to build a path to get there. And it's hard to do on your own, I know, but there's nothing I can tell you that I know for sure is going to get your hips open at impact, because everybody's a little bit different. I wish it was easy and I could do that, but something like that, there's so many things that can be happening that can be stopping you from getting there. So if you're interested in unlimited swing reviews, I highly recommend clicking the Get a Review link at the top of the page. Now, if what I said here doesn't just light up a bell and tell you, hey, this I know this is what's going on, I'm going to go work on this and get my hips to open up, then what we need to do is do some unlimited swing reviews to know for sure. Otherwise, you're just kind of throwing stuff at the wall and hoping it sticks, right? Which is a fine way of doing it. It's just going to take longer if you do that. If you want to get right down to it, highly recommend signing up for unlimited swing reviews. So do that. Click the Get a Review link at the top of the page. Scroll down there. If you see a spot available with me, go ahead and grab it. I'm not sure if there are any spots available right now. Last I knew, there weren't. But things could have changed here in the last day. When I checked yesterday, there weren't any spots available. But hey, if you see a spot available, go ahead and grab it. If not, join my waiting list, so that way you get notified whenever I open up spots again in the future. But the stop early extension courses, those are going to be the courses that are most likely going to help you the most. So John S. says, how does shallowing the club typically fit into shots requiring shorter backswings? So that's a good question. So essentially, We have to shallow the club in the downswing for full swing shots because the club is off plane. So if you imagine I have this club, right, and if we want to find kind of what the swing plane is, the easiest way to do that would be to just draw a line from the hosel of the club up through my trail elbow, right? So if you draw a line through there, that's going to give us a good, and it's not exact, but it basically gives us a good indication of where that swing plane is. So when I go up to the top, we're typically going to get above that swing plane, and it's gonna require you to shallow the club to get the club back onto the plane in the start of the downswing. That's all shallowing is. Let's define what it is. Shallowing the club is flattening out the club plane, or basically the path of the club, to get it on the desired swing plane, or even just under, or I guess getting it on the desired swing plane, because getting it under the neutral swing plane would be ideal for some people, right? If you're trying to hit a draw, depending on the shot pattern that you're trying to make, and so on and so forth. So that's all shallowing the club is. Shallowing the club is just basically flattening out, getting that club shallower, so that because it gets above the plane, to get it back down on it. Now on a shorter swing, typically you're not going to be moving that club off the plane. It's still going to be pretty close to it. So if I bring this club back here, it's going to be more of a pivot, right? So if I bring this club back here, it's really not going to be moving off of that plane. So there's really no need for me to really shallow it. It may be already on it. And there might be a need for me to only slightly shallow it. So if we understand exactly what shallowing means, it's very easy to understand what you need to do. So like I said, shallowing is just getting the club onto the desired plane, flattening it out to get it onto the desired plane. If you're someone like Ricky Fowler, for example, he brings this club back and he has the club really, really shallow in his backswing. He brings it up and he actually kind of lays it off so much that it's too shallow. So in the start of his downswing, he actually steepens the club. He is steepening it, but that steepening gets it on plane, right? Whereas that's fairly rare. You don't see that in a lot of players. Typically when players are like that, what they do is they overdo it, right? But that's not something that Ricky Fowler does. Most players, like a Tiger Woods, Adam Scott, I mean, basically almost every single tour player is getting the club above the plane, and then they need to shallow the club to get it back on. And it's more prevalent in full swings. In shorter swings, there may need to be some shallowing, but there may not be as much because the club may already be on the plane or just above it. The longer you go in your swing, typically the more elevated you're going to get the club, right? And the more you're going to need to shallow it in the downswing. But for a short swing, you may not need to. So I just look on video, draw that elbow plane, get that camera view right, which is really important. By the way, when you're looking at swing planes on video, the most important thing is to get that camera angle right. So get that camera set up, get it set up down your toe line. You should see when you look at this on video. Now, if you're hitting a pitch shot and your feet are more open, then this isn't going to apply. And what I would do is I would take like a club or an alignment stick, I place it on the ground, and then what I would do, so I place this on the ground, point it at a target. Now I take your camera and line it up exactly with it. So if I were to take a camera, I just line it up exactly with this, right in line with this. And then I would set up to this with my toes pretty close to it. So basically my hands are right above it. That's where I want to be. So if I have a little bit open stance, it would be like this. I'm still hitting to that target, but this would be, if I have a square stance, this would basically be where I'd be at. And that's going to give you the right camera angle. Now, what you want to make sure of is that you're not setting that up and then you're like this. This is more toward your target line. You need to have your hands directly above it. It needs to be pretty close to your toes. It's going to be within an inch or two of your toes typically. For a driver, it might be a little bit more than that because your hands are a little bit further out away from you. But for a normal club, it's going to be a couple inches away from your toes. So if you get that right, then this camera angle, now this isn't technically the right camera angle because it's too high and it's too close. You want to be about waist level, far away enough to where you and the club never leave the frame, and then shooting right down your toe line essentially. But if you get this camera angle right, you can draw that elbow plane that I talked about which is the plane that goes from the hosel of the club up through the trail elbow. And you can see how that club is working in relationship to that plane. So if on your shorter swings, you're seeing that that club is basically staying on that plane, and then you bring it right back down on that plane, then I would say you're in good shape, right? If you're looking at it and you're seeing that your club is working outside that plane, and then it's working out, above that plane in the downswing, that means you're coming down steep. It either means that you need to still bring it up here and then shallow it out, or you need to bring it more to the inside on your shorter swings, right? Either or. So some players like to bring the club more out and then bring it in. Some players like to bring it, more on plane and then bring it back on plane on the downswing. I don't really recommend this, but there's some players with the pitches that I've seen bring it way inside. You typically don't see it, and then steepen it up just a little bit in the downswing to get it on plane. Kind of like what I talked about with Ricky Fowler in his full swing, he steepens it up. But it's typically not. Typically, what you're going to see with most tour players is you're going to see kind of what I would say is a one swing plane, right? With their a one plane swing, with their pitch shots. They pretty much bring it right back. They bring it up on plane and then usually slightly under or right on it in the downswing. So there's maybe just a tiny bit of shallowing, but it's not necessary typically unless to really shallow the club with a short shot, unless you bring the club up really steep above that plane. And at that point, you have to flatten it out to get on there. Otherwise, you're going to chop down into it, cut across it, and those aren't things you want to do with a pitch shot. So it's basically how it pertains to shallowing. So if you understand what it is that you're doing, what shallowing means exactly, then it's very easy to understand what you need to do with your shots. It's just getting the club on the plane. All right, so let's keep moving here. So Carl C says, working on the move, but have problems being consistent with how much I turn the doorknob and bow the wrist. Any hints on what aids can help me to be more consistent? Would attaching a laser pointer to my club be useful? It could be. When you're working through the move, what you want to do is actually exaggerate it and do it as much as you possibly can, right? So I would go to the complete other end of the spectrum, because the reason why we have that course set up the way that it is that basically what we want you to do is we want you to shallow the club too much. So we want you to get you to where when you're coming down and you're starting down the downswing, that club is way too shallowed out. And we want to get this club to where it's also too closed as well. So that way, when you're coming down, you're opening up here and you're hitting these big hooks that start to the right and curve to the left. That's what we're trying to get you to do in the move. So you may be kind of in the middle of it and thinking, and maybe I haven't actually watched all the videos in a while, so I don't remember exactly what Clay says in the course. And maybe he's not, maybe he doesn't verbalize this as much. But basically, what we're trying to get you to do is we're trying to get you in the move to hit shots that start way to the right. If you're right-handed, by the way, start way to the right and curve to the left toward the target. We're trying to get you to hit big hooks. So if you're thinking you're inconsistent with it because you're not hitting it that perfect draw every single time, that's not what we want you to do. We want you to go to the extreme. Overdo it. Get to where it's way too shallow, way too close. So you're really opening up and hitting those big hooks as you're coming in. At that point, that's when we tone it down. And that's what Clay talks about in the last couple of videos of the move. In fact, if I go, I'll pull up the move course on mine. If I go to it here, trying to remember what the titles of the videos are in the move. Because basically, I believe the last two videos are about getting that tone down. And that's where you're going to want to get to. So, yeah, so it's actually, so after the tennis ready drill, Clay talks about the lag whip in there. So using the momentum of the club. And then he talks about after that, how to start hitting a solid draw instead of overhooking, right? So that's where you're going to want to go to. So get to where you're overdoing it. You're hitting these big hooks. Don't worry about tightening it down. Get to where you're over shallowing it, you're overhooking it, you're coming in, and you're just hitting these really compressed strong hooks. Get to where you're doing that. And, then at that point, because that's going to be when you get through 1.4 in the move, that's what you should be able to do. You should be able to hit a really strong, using the momentum of the club and whipping it through there, getting that really, really compressed, strong shot. Once you're able to do that, then you move to 1.5, which is hitting a solid draw, stop overhooking. And that's where you get to where the plan to be being more consistent. You basically tone this down, and you get to where instead of the big hook, right, you're easing off of it. So what you want to do is go way too much and then ease off of it. Ease off of it a little bit. Ease off of it a little bit. And that's really what's going to help you. You don't need a laser pointer. You don't need anything like that. All you need to do is work through 1.1, 1.2, all the way through. Get to where you're overhooking it. Then do 1.5, which is getting it to where you're hitting solid shots, solid draws, right? So it's just toning down that hook a little bit. You're still going to be hitting a little bit of a hook, more of a really draw shot. And then 1.6, he just talks about how tour players use the move. And then 1.7 is now hitting dead straight shots with the move. So now you got to where you were overhooking it. Then you got to where you're hitting basically a baby hook, a little draw. And then you get to where you're hitting straight shots. So Clay goes through that all in the last videos there. So like I said, go through getting it to overhook, start to the right, curve to the left, tone that down, then tone that down to straighter shots. Clay goes through that in the last couple of videos of the course. So I'm guessing you just kind of got into the middle of it and you're wondering, okay, how do I get this? And I'm guessing he's just not verbalizing in there. I need to go back and watch it. I haven't watched it in a long time. Not verbalizing in there, hey, we're going to tone this down later. Don't worry about the hooks. That's what we're trying to do. But that's where you want to. That's where you're going to be moving toward as you move through the course. All right, so let's keep moving here. All right, so Michael J says, "Hi Q, I really am trying to work on my weight shift, and I've done the step drill." Probably 10 miles worth. Is that really the feel that when the club is in the backswing, your weight is already on the left side instep of your foot? I can do the drill. I just can't execute when setting up to a ball. Anything else I can do? So that's really, what you need to do is get comfortable with being uncomfortable. It's not that you can't do it. It's just that you're probably just having a little bit of trouble getting out of your comfort zone. So yes, your weight is going to be shifting to your lead side as you get up to the top of the swing, right? So that doesn't mean that all your pressure is going to be here. It just means that your weight's going to be shifting to your lead side as you're getting up to the top of the swing. So your backswing technically, or your downswing technically starts when the club switches directions, right? But your momentum is going to be moving to your lead side as that club's switching directions. So just to talk about pressure in the feet, I really, there's this training aid that I've seen out there. I've seen some instructors make that I really want to make because I think it would really illustrate what we're trying to do. So basically, it's almost like a little teeter-totter, right? So imagine I was standing on top of a teeter-totter, right? And at address, I've got my left foot is the low part of the teeter-totter, and my right foot is on the right side of the teeter-totter, right? Well, as soon as I start my backswing, as soon as I start my the club going back, I want that teeter-totter to switch, right? So I'm putting pressure in my trail foot. Now, what you can do if you want is already have that there to get comfortable with it already being there. But eventually, to gain more power and to get more force putting in here, it's better to have a little bit of momentum moving that way. But you can put the pressure there already. So now I've got that teeter-totter going here. And then as I'm getting to the top, right, as I'm getting up to the top, my teeter-totter is now going to my lead side. So I'm up to the top, and now my teeter-totter is going to the lead side before my hands start down. So I'm getting that pressure shift to the lead side. Now, it's not going to be fully there, but it's moving that way. So basically, tour players, they're maxing out their pressure in their trail foot in this area here. And then that pressure is starting to move to the lead side as they're going up. So as they're going up, it's basically 90%. It's maxing out right here. That's where most of the pressure is, right? And as they're getting up to the top, now it's more like 75 is here. And then as we're starting down, now I'm getting 75, 80% of pressure on my lead foot. That teeter-totter, I'm digging that teeter-totter into the ground, and then I'm coming all the way around. And again, at the full finish here, I've got 90, 95% on my lead foot. So that's basically what you want to feed here. So the step drill is the best drill to get this. And my guess is that you're trying to take what you're doing to the step drill and then instantly trying to transfer it to the golf swing. So what I try to do is I would get the step drill with the normal swing, right? Get that with or get the step drill with the, get to where you're comfortable with that and getting that feeling of that pressure shift going to the lead side, getting that as you're going up the top, getting that pressure shift forward, get comfortable with that. And then what I would do is I'd make some practice swings where you're trying to replicate that same thing. Then I would get to where you're getting comfortable with that, and then I would try to apply it to the golf ball and get comfortable with being uncomfortable. That's what you have to do. That's what you have to do. If it's, if it should feel awkward, right? If you're trying to change something that you're doing right now, it's going to feel awkward, right? If you do something else, it's like, take for instance, there's a great video on YouTube with this guy who had a bike made for him, or somebody had made a bike and asked him to ride it, but it was an inverted bike. So when you turn the handlebar that way, when you turned it to the left, the wheel turned to the right and opposite, right? So it's the opposite of what you would think. And you developed a motor pattern, right? I think most people know how to ride a bike. He developed a motor pattern to ride a bike, right? You don't ride a bike instantly, right? It takes, you're going to fall down. You're going to make a lot of failures. It's going to feel awkward, but then you develop the motor pattern to do it. And then now they have this other bike where it turns the opposite way. Well, your old motor pattern is going to be fighting against you. And I'm telling you, it was hilarious. He gets on this bike and he can't ride it 2 feet. And, initially, and it took him like 8 months to be able to ride this bike without falling down, to be able to ride it 100 feet without falling over. Right. And he's still pretty shaky, like, because his brain was fighting against his brain was fighting against his old motor pattern, his old habit. Habit's probably not the right word, but because it has a negative context, but basically his old motor pattern, he was fighting against it. So that's essentially what's going on with you, is that your motor pattern right now is most likely to get on your lead side, start your downswing, and then the momentum of your arms is what brings your weight shift to your lead side. That's your current motor pattern. So it's going to feel uncomfortable for you to do something completely different in the downswing. So the best way to do that is exaggerate the opposite, which is what you're doing in the step drill. Try to translate it to a practice swing without the golf ball, and then do it with the golf ball. That's how I'd work through it. It's going to take some time and some repetition. Like I said, it took him 8 months. I'm not saying it's going to take you 8 months to do it, but it's going to take some hard work to get there. So that's what I would recommend doing. Just get out of your comfort zone a little bit. It'll get better. So Anthony M says, greetings, Q from England. The faster I swing, the more my upper body takes over and my right shoulder works out. How do you calm down the upper body in the downswing? Very similar to what Michael was talking about. You got to make sure that you're initiating and getting to your lead side sooner. If you start your downswing with your arms, it's just going to take, it's too late. It's just going to take over, right? So what we need to do is we need to get that good weight shift, get that proper sequence, get that good weight shift to the lead side, and that's going to be able to trigger the arms and allow you to whip that club through there. So the best drill for this is the step drill in the 20-minute distance fixed course, the sumo step drill. That's what I'd highly recommend working on, is working on the step drill a lot and getting that initiation of the lower body. So that way you can create that momentum to really help you whip that club through. You can get a lot of speed just doing what you're talking about, but you're not going to get the maximum amount of speed unless you create momentum with the lower body. you can get 80-85% of your speed just from your arms. If I just took my arms, right, if I just went like this and took my arms and just swung as hard as I could without, using my lower body really at all, except to kind of brace what was going on, without really turning my lower body, I should say, and creating momentum with it, I could get, 80-85% of my speed. I can swing about 120 miles per hour with my driver. I could probably get close to, I would probably get in the 90s, I would imagine, if I did this. I know Clay has done swings where he sat in a chair and kind of done something very similar and swung 100 miles per hour from sitting in a chair. So that's without using, your hips, really just bracing your body essentially against the ground. So you can get a lot of speed from that, but to get the lower body involved and to be able to get up to the 120 miles per hour, or to get that 20%, the extra, you've got to create speed from the lower body, that momentum, that whipping effect. And that comes from doing the step drill and the 20-minute distance fix. So to get to that drill, just click the instruction tab, then click the 20-minute distance fix. And then it's in week 1, the sumo step drill. That's I highly recommend going through the whole course. But the sumo step drill, it sounds like you've already kind of been in there because you're talking about swinging as hard as you can, which is what we talk about in the 20-minute distance fix course. Sounds like you're already in there. So that's what I would recommend doing, is doing that sumo step drill, putting a little bit more time in that if you got it. So James V says, can swing a weighted club increase swing speed? Not really in my experience. I wouldn't really recommend it. Really, if you're looking for the best ways to increase your club head speed, the 20-minute distance fix is the way to go. I don't recommend it for a couple of reasons. One, I think it's kind of hard on your body and your joints. I'm not a big fan of swinging heavy clubs. I'm just not a big fan of it because it really puts a lot of stress on your wrists and your elbows. And it can put a lot of stress on your shoulders and things like that. That's just not necessary. And also what it does is it can kind of take away your feel for the club. You want the club head to kind of feel heavy. You want it to feel that way because you can feel it. You can feel the club head more when you do that. So I'm not a big fan of it. Could it increase swing speed? I suppose. But I find that you lose speed from it. The best way to increase your club head speed is going to be, one, increasing your range of motion. So getting a bigger hip turn, shoulder turn, getting these hands further back, right? Not sacrificing your spine angle to do it, but getting in that proper position there at the top, creating as much space and time to accelerate the club. So that's number one. Number two is proper sequencing. So getting loaded up properly, right? We've already talked about this a little bit. So getting loaded up properly, getting to the lead side properly and have that correct timing of that, using the legs properly, creating that lag whip effect. So getting that good lag and then releasing that lag, that's all in proper sequencing, right? This is in the 20-minute distance fix. We touch on it in the sumo step drill, half backswing, full follow through, hammer throw. There's lots of great drills in the 20-minute distance fix to get you that proper feeling of that. And then lastly, it's just swinging with 100% effort. That's what the neural adaptation part of it is. So imagine if you were someone who was trying to dunk a basketball, right? Well, if you're a kid trying to dunk a basketball, what I would do if let's say I had a son who was trying to dunk a basketball. Well, what I would do is I would put the rim at a height where he can just barely dunk it, right? Where he can barely get it right now. And then I would just try to raise it a little bit all the time. Just try to, that's going to keep him trying to jump as high as he can all the time. And he's going to get what's called neural adaptation from doing that. His body's going to adapt to it, and he's going to build the strength to be able to jump, right? We may work on, some technique, which is kind of like what we do in the 20-minute distance fix by increasing range of motion and sequencing and things like that. We may learn how to use momentum and to, throw our arms up to dunk and jump off 2 feet, 1 foot, that sort of thing. But a big part of that is just jumping as high as he possibly can every day. It's no different for any powerful athletic movement. You're trying to push the limits all the time and do it as hard as you can all the time with anything that you're doing with power, right? So that's the same thing in golf. If you're trying to build speed and power, You need to do it with 100% effort. Now, is that the effort that you're using? Because golf is a precision game, right? Is that the effort that you're using when you're out on the golf course? No, it's not. It's not the same. You're not going to swing with 100% effort when you're out on the golf course. You're going to have a playing speed, which is more under control. It's going to be that perfect mesh of power and control, right? But when you're speed training, you can let a little bit of that control go, and I actually recommend that you do, and swing with 100% effort. So that's really what I would recommend doing. Is really just what's in there. The weighted clubs, I'm just not a big fan of them because I think it's hard on the joints, and it's just asking for an injury that's just not necessary. It's not something that we have found is the most effective way to create club head speed. What's in the 20-minute distance fix is what we have found is the most effective way to create club head speed. All right, so let's keep moving here. Now we have quite a bit of questions left, so I'm going to move through the rest of these pretty quickly. So Tom S says, Clay talks about, I want to make sure I accidentally skipped Vincent here. So Vincent says, I'm playing golf for over a year now, and now that I record my swings, I see that I've developed a bad habit of holding my left arm close to or even against my body and only keeping right arm straight in follow through. Straight of holding it off. I noticed that it's difficult changing the habit by doing full swings because I'm so used to it. Is that a good idea to only do half swings? You could do it that way. So there's basically two ways you could go about it. You could do it in a shorter swing and build it up to a longer and longer and longer swing, or you can do it at a slower speed, a full swing, and do it at a slower speed and build it up. Or you can do both, right? You can have it as a slow, shorter swing, then build it up to a full speed short swing, and then go to a little bit longer swing, go slow, and then build it up. So there's either way is fine. You can do it in a half swing and then but the goal is to get it to work toward a longer swing, right? And if you're doing it at a slower speed, the goal is to work it toward a faster speed. So it's really up to you. But yeah, you want to either start with a shorter, slower swing, either or, and then build up the speed and length, either or. Either or is fine to do it that way. So Tom S says, Clay talks about closing the face of the driver by turning the hands in the downswing tennis racket drill. Is this primarily to create a draw since there is no issue with forward shaft lean? Why not use a stronger grip or make the adjustment in alignment and club face position at address? So you could use a stronger grip to help in this, and you won't need to do it as much. Because typically if you have a stronger grip at the top of the swing, right, you're going to have a more cupped position at the top, and then you're still going to need to do this. If you have a very strong position, there's just things in the backswing that I see a lot of times. People who have stronger swings, typically, or stronger grips, typically bring this club really far inside, then swing over the top and kind of go like this. So not a big fan of really strong grips, right? I like neutral to slightly strong for most players. I think that's going to help work the best, and that's going to get them more in a flat position here at the top. And then we want to turn that handle as we're coming down. But you can try. Everyone's a little bit different. You can use a stronger grip if you want, but keep in mind that it may change the way that your body moves because of the way your hands are positioned. Because typically with a stronger grip, you're going to get more angled away, right? Because of the position of your hands. You're going to have your elbow is going to be pointing more toward the target, even right of the target. Your trail arm is going to be more under, typically. Your elbow pit's going to be pointing more out, right? Your shoulders are typically going to be a little bit more closed when you do this. And when that happens, I see a lot of people, they bring the club really inside. And what happens is they'll tend to either kind of stay there and chunk it, right? Stay behind it. Or that momentum will kind of bring them over the top, and they'll tend to kind of go like this in the downswing. So they'll be too far angled away, and then they'll want to go like that. So everyone's a little bit different. You can do that, but typically you're still going to need to turn that handle in the downswing because to get into a good position at the top, if you have a really strong grip, you're typically going to have a little bit more of a cupping in the wrist there at the top. And then as you start down, you're going to get that to be where it's flattened out and you're in a good position at impact. So yes, you can do that and it can help, but it's usually not going to be a replacement. And I understand why a lot of people go to that because, oh, it's just so simple. I can just strengthen my grip. Well, what we don't realize a lot of times is what really having a strong grip can do to your swing. It can make things different in your swing. It's going to throw off other things. So typically it's better to basically shallow. You need to shallow out the club, but a lot of times having a really strong grip makes it more difficult to do that. And then the turning of the handle, you may not need to do as much. Like if you have a very weak grip, you really need to turn down the handle. If you have a really strong grip, you don't need to turn down the handle as much, but you're typically going to have, to be in a good position at the top, you're typically going to have more of a cupped wrist at the top. So like I said, you're going to need to be doing something in the start of the downswing if you're in a good position at the top with a strong grip. So Michael J says, to video your swing, which is better angle from video form to video from? Is it face on, the camera is looking at you, or is it behind the view, down the line view with the camera is behind you? Do you ever recommend having the camera facing you? I know that put your cell phone in danger makes for great videos on TV, but it's actually a good video as well. So what I recommend typically when you're looking at your swing, you equally want a face-on view and a down-the-line view, right? There's certain things in a face-on view. When I say face-on, the club's basically, here's your target line, club's perpendicular to you, about waist level, far away enough to where you and the club stay in the frame the entire time. That view, there's certain things that you're going to be able to see, like, let's say, shoulder turn, spine angle. Are you staying in a good spine angle? Are you leaning toward the target? Weight shift. Are you moving down? Are you moving up? Are you standing up? That sort of thing. You can see those things in a face-on view. The lag that you're generating. Are you casting the club? Where you're releasing it? Things like that. Those are things you can see in the face-on view. In the down-the-line view, we can't see a lot of those things. I can't tell if your spine angle is angled away. It's hard to tell if you're getting a good weight shift to your lead side. It's hard to tell if you're releasing the club early or not. I can guess, by seeing certain things that would clue to that in the down-the-line view, but you're not going to know everything. So in the down line view, what you can see is, are you standing up? Are you moving out of the way? Are your hips moving toward or away from the golf ball? How the hip movement is much easier to see in the down line view. Is the club shallowing out early? Is it shallowing out late? Is it coming down steep? Things like that. I can see the plane of the club typically as it's coming in if the camera angle is correct. So really you need both. If you see a face on and a down the line, that's going to give you a pretty much a full picture of what you're looking at. And sure, looking at things from a bird's eye view, looking at things from behind, looking at things from in front, those can be beneficial. It could be things that you're looking at there. But really, all you really need to get a full picture of what's going on is a face on and a down the line view. If you have those views, that's what I always ask for in swing reviews, is just a face on and down the line view. That'll give me an entire idea of what's going on. So hopefully that makes sense. But yeah, you want both. So Kevin M says, hi, quick question. Does the swing strike speed predominantly come from the wrist release? One guy says yes. Another guy says no, it becomes too flippy. Who is correct, please? Where club head speed comes from is basically creating space with this club, right? So, yes, the wrist release, you need to release the club. You can't be like this and go through like that. You won't have a lot of speed. You need that release of the club. Absolutely. Now you can release the club early and still have a lot of speed, but that's not going to be the most efficient way to hit the golf ball because that's going to add loft, right? So I wouldn't say, if I take my club, I would say it mostly comes from the arms, because I can take my club and swing it. Well, it's hard to say. I'm not sure exactly where all the speed comes from, but it mostly comes from your upper body. I do know that. Now, if I took, basically you just have to isolate each piece and see what each piece does. So if I just took my hands, right, like this, hinged them fully, and went like that, like, is that where I'm going to get, am I going to get more speed from that? Or am I going to get more speed if I just had my hands like this and turned like that? That's my shoulder turn, right? So my shoulder turn, I kind of feel like I'm getting a little bit more from my shoulders than I am my wrists, but I could be wrong there. But really, the answer to the question is, why does it matter? It doesn't matter. What matters is creating as much time in space as possible in the swing. Like, I don't understand arguments that there's no, the answer to the question doesn't really give you an insight into anything. All it does is, oh, cool, okay, so most of the speed comes from the wrist. No, you're going to be using the wrist no matter what. It's not like if one guy is right, everyone's going to start swinging like this, and if the other guy's right, everyone's going to swing like that. No, that's not how it's going to work. You're still going to be swinging where you're creating as much time and space. You're creating as much space and time to accelerate the club, and that's going to be with wrists. That's going to be with your hip turn. That's going to be with your thoracic spine. That's going to be with your shoulders. That's going to be with your arms elevating and getting back here, and that's going to be with the wrists, right? All of those are going to play a role, creating speed and creating as much time and space. So really the answer to the question is, who cares? But the reality is that it's probably coming mostly from the wrists and the arms, right? So the arms in the shoulders sockets, that's probably where most of the speed's coming from. It'd be hard to create a lot of speed just with the hips. It's probably more with the shoulders. It's mostly with the shoulders and the wrists for the most part. So Diane C says, can you show how the face should look when you are at the address position? I think that I have it too close. Can you show how it looks at the top of the swing to get the right position at impact? So, yeah, so basically square is pretty good at address. So basically having the leading edge perpendicular to the target. So if I have my angle finder on here, I would have this pointed right at the target. But really, it doesn't matter, right? And the reason is that I can have my face, right? It only matters how it's pointing at impact. That's the only place where it matters. So if I can be at address and have my face really closed, and then come down and come into contact and have it very square, right? And I can be at address here and have my face very open, and then come into contact and have it very square, right? So really, it doesn't matter. But in general, setting it up square to where the leading edge of the club is perpendicular, that's how most people are going to do it. Now, kind of the same thing at the top, right? So at the top of the swing, I typically what I like to see is the face being kind of pointed up to the sky. And this is a little bit hard to tell because there's loft on this club. Essentially, if you look at the leading edge of the club at the top of the swing, you essentially want to see that pointing up to the sky. That's an indication of a fairly neutral club face. So if I have it up here, and if I have my lead wrist very cupped, and you can see the leading edge is pointing more that way, that face is very open. I'm going to have to do things in the downswing to get that face closed at impact. And if I have it like this, where the leading edge is pointing more that way, right, that face is very closed. I'm going to have to do things in the downswing to get that face opened up. So, but again, that doesn't mean that I can be at the top of the swing like this, and I can't come into impact with a square club face. And it doesn't mean that I can't be at the top with the face pointed way that way and come into impact with the face squared up. So what you really want to focus on is what's going on at impact. And like we talked about earlier, a good setup sets up a good backswing, and a good backswing sets up a good downswing, and a good downswing sets up a good impact. So if you find that you're having trouble getting the face squared up at impact, and it's maybe because you have the face really open. Let's say you're leaving the face open at impact, and you have the face really open at address. Well, I'll try getting that face squared up and see if that helps you to get it square at impact. And if you have the face very closed at address and you come into impact with the face very closed, well, then it may benefit you to kind of square that up at address to get that working better. Same thing with the backswing. If at the backswing, at the top of the swing, if I have the face very open, right, so that'd be like this. If I have the face very open and I leave the face open at impact, then it may benefit you to get that face more closed at the top. So that's going to come from this lead wrist being more in a flat position or even slightly bowed position to get that club face to be more pointing up to the sky. And if I have trouble getting the face too closed, it may benefit you to actually have more of a cupped wrist at the top and getting the club face to be pointing more that way to get, basically to compensate for that. So that's what you have to look at. Is you don't want to look at, is my backswing good? Is my downswing good? You want to look at what's going on at impact. And then is there something I'm doing in my setup? Is there something I'm doing in my backswing? Is there something I'm doing in my downswing that is causing a poor impact? That's how you want to look at it. So ran out of time today. I'm sorry about that, folks. But I will be back Monday, 5 p.m. Eastern time. Everybody have a good rest of your day, and I will talk to you all next time.